Hi, I'm Mike Richman, publisher of Quality Digest. I'm joined today by Rick Gehrke, Green Services Associate Program Manager for Intertek. Rick, thanks for taking a few moments today to discuss OHSAS 18001 and ISO 45001.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get right into it. Maybe we can start with the benefits. You can tell us the benefits of certification to OHSAS 18001 and what types of companies need to be certified to it.
Well, when we're talking about benefits of OHSAS 18001 or ISO 45001, first of all, there's a set of benefits that come with having the system in the first place, regardless of whether a company gets registered or not. And that is just that there are so many problems out there with worker health and safety, and having an organized management system to control those hazards and risks is beneficial to anyone. Now, the benefit to a third-party registration is that a lot of organizations I've audited, and I always talk with the top managers and the people there to find out why they're doing it. And they like having an extra set of eyes in there, because we go in there, we see a lot of different facilities and a lot of different industries, and we're able to bring in some fresh perspective on what they might be doing, things they could be doing better, things we've seen at other places. So there's a benefit there. Another benefit of a third-party registration is that it adds an element of rigor to the process. We've gotten through internal auditing or second-party auditing. So when you have an objective third party coming in who are themselves being audited by an accreditation body, it helps tighten things up and it keeps the bar going up, which is the whole idea of continual improvement. Now, some organizations might have a customer or other stakeholder demand for certification. In other words, they've got a customer they can't ship parts to unless they have an active third-party accredited registration to one of the standards. Some of them just want to do it themselves because it helps keep them on their toes and it helps them run a better system. Now, as far as applicability, the way these standards are written, both ISO 14001, OHSAS 18001, and now ISO 45001, is that they can really be applied to any type of organization. This could be a factory, an office building, a service organization that's got field operations, really a school, a military unit, pretty much anybody that has any kind of safety or ergonomic risks that they want to control.
Now, the first draft of ISO 45001 has been released now, and maybe you can discuss for us how the standard differs from OHSAS 18001.
Well, first of all, remember that this is still in its early development. The first committee draft was just released, and that's out for comment now. The first thing is that the new standard is written to conform with Annex SL of the ISO IEC Directives Part 1. And what that means is that the high-level structure of the standard is the same. There are things like core requirements that are common to all the ISO management system standards. So there's going to definitely be a structural change up front. To adopt their existing systems to it, it's going to make them do some work for people that are new at it but have seen the newer versions of 9001 and 14001. It should make things easier. Now, there are a lot of differences, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more later. But some of the things that are different, for example, is that there's a lot of emphasis now on context, which we're seeing also in sustainability standards, where the organization has to determine both internal and external issues that are relevant to the purpose and objectives of the system. There's a lot more emphasis on leadership responsibilities. In the OHSAS standard, it comes in resources, roles, responsibilities, and authorities and management review. But now with ISO 45001, there's an entire section up front that's devoted to very explicitly stating what the leadership responsibilities are in the system. There are other things, actually some pretty substantial changes that we're seeing, and I think they're all good. They're probably things that anybody system would probably want to do. For example, there's an emphasis on determining who the interested parties are, what their requirements are, legal and other requirements. More top management responsibility and accountability is explicit. Things like hierarchy of control are more explicit. Management of change has its own element. There are separate changes for hierarchy of controls, outsourcing, procurement, contractors, and things like that that are within subsections of OHSAS 1, but 45001 makes them more explicit. The terms and definitions are really good in ISO 45001, at least the draft as it stands right now. I've had a chance to read through this a few times, and it'll help clarify the meaning of what the requirements are. So anyone that's looking at this new to implement a program needs to make sure that they read all those definitions carefully, because they do change the meaning of the requirements. The section on improvement, nonconforming and corrective action have been moved into separate sections on improvement and continual improvement. So there's another structural change. And the appendix for it also is really good.
So, Rick, how will the standard now affect organizations that are already certified, registered to OHSAS 18001?
It'll affect organizations differently depending on how their systems are implemented. Some of them are going to have quite a bit of work to do. One, because the structure has changed. So if they want to model their manual on the structure of the new ISO 45001 standard, they're going to have to work on that. There are new requirements. Remember that we're still talking about a committee draft right now, so some of these could go, but there are some pretty substantial changes between ISO 45001 and OHSAS 18001 that will have to be addressed, both from any consulting organizations they're working with, all their internal audit checklists, their procedures, document control, all those things are going to have to be modified. Now, another thing to think about is, I'm guessing that these bodies, once the transition period is over, is they will no longer recognize OHSAS 18001 as an accredited standard. So we'll be how that transition is going to take place, which is also going to affect registered organizations. One of the differences is that ISO 45001 is a brand new standard rather than a revision to an existing standard, and that's going to affect the transition part of it quite a bit.
That goes to the heart of my next question, which I think is important for organizations that are maybe just beginning this journey. So should organizations new to this consider certification to OHSAS 18001, or do you think they should wait for the release of ISO 45001?
I think it depends on where they are in the project. For example, let's say you got an organization that's already built their system using OHSAS 18001. They're just on the verge of getting ready to go ahead and get registered to it, or they're thinking about doing it next year. They would probably want to go ahead and stay with the pony they're on and continue with OHSAS 18001. Now, if someone's very early in the process, for example, if I was a brand new management rep at a brand new company that doesn't have any formal safety program, personally, I would get myself of the latest draft, whatever's current and newest at the time of ISO 45001, model my system around that, and then also make sure that it conforms with the requirements of OHSAS 18001. 18001 is, you can consider those requirements kind of a subset of ISO 45001. If you build a 45001 compliant system, it'll pass an 18001 audit. So again, if you're going brand new, you might want to go ahead and go with the new one. But if you've got an existing system that is close to registration, you're going to be doing it anytime within the next year or two, you might want to go ahead and stick with OHSAS 18000, depending on where the organization's at in its process.
Now, not going to hold you to this because I know it's just a draft, but although it is still in development, what do you think the major changes to the standard are going to be when ISO 45001 replaces OHSAS 18001?
Okay, so we already talked about some in response to one of the earlier questions, but the aim of this standard is really the same as OHSAS 18001. It's really just more explicit in how some things are done, add some documentation requirements and things like that. And I think it kind of expands the scope a little bit in terms of what an organization needs to look at, especially with respect to context. Some of the changes will be functionally significant, like the different sections that we talked about, and they will actually require organizations to change their management systems. With the really big things that you have to look into, like identification of hazards and evaluation of risk, operational controls, procedures, all your lockout, tagout, and confined space entry. Those kind of things that you have to have in place to satisfy OSHA anyway aren't going to change. It's going to be more the difference in the way the management system is written and the way some things have to be documented. Right now, the committee draft is up for a 3-month review, and then there's another committee meeting coming up in December 2014. And just for timing purposes, we expect the actual final standard to not come out until fourth quarter 2016.
So given that time frame, what do you expect the transition period for those certified OHSAS 18001 will look like after that release, that final release of ISO 45001?
Right now, we don't know, because let's say we look back to where ISO 14001 2004 replaced the 96 version. Sometimes we're looking at a 3-year transition period. Like I said before, this is a brand new standard rather than an upgrade to an existing standard. I think we might reasonably expect a 3-year transition between the release of the new one and the ending of the accreditation for the old one. But it's really early in the, I talked with our accreditation manager, Danielle Delisets, earlier this week, and he said the next IAF meeting coming up, there's going to be a recommendation for the establishment of a task force to accommodate the new standard. For as far as an 18,001 to 45,001 transition plan. All the accrediting bodies are going to have to come up with their own rules, and they'll be keeping us updated on this as it goes along. And as soon as we get news, we'll get the word out to all of our registered clients who are looking at the need to make that transition. So again, I can't really say for sure what the transition period will be. But one thing I can tell you is that everybody will be notified about all the pending changes just as soon as we get the word. So there's not going to be any need for anybody to panic unless they wait until the last 2 months of the transition period to make the switch, which is one of the things we saw when 14,001 changed. So as far as time periods right now, the committee draft second quarter 14. We're hoping for a draft international standard by the spring of next year. And then there'll be a final international draft standard, assuming everything goes smoothly, in the summer of 2016, and then a fourth quarter release of the final standard.
And finally, what would you say to somebody who was just finding out about this for the first time, maybe has gotten word this is something that they need to investigate? How would you maybe phrase the value proposition for, say, ISO 45001 for an organization looking at this for the first time?
Well, I'd tell them if they're doing anything that has any kind of occupational health and safety risks, including those that are psychosocial, originating outside the workforce, I'd say there's definitely value in having a system to deal with it. And I would advise them first to get a copy of the standard and then sit down with somebody like me or with a consultant and look at their organization and find out what the potential benefits are of having that system in place. And then call me to get a quote for registration services.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that plug at the end. All right. Well, we've been talking again with Rick Gehrke, Green Services Associate Program Manager for Intertek, about OHSAS 18001 and the coming ISO 45001. So, Rick, again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your insights on this important topic.
Thank you, Mike.
Great. Talk to you soon.
All right.